Hey guys, how's it going? Eli here, back with another video where today we're going to be having, in my opinion, an important conversation and topic in regards to why I do think reprinting Pokemon product to demand is a good thing. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. As always, getting out of the way, we are going to be doing weekly giveaways. Winners will, of course, always be announced on Monday. All you have to do to enter is be subscribed, leave a like, and comment down below on any of the videos we post each and every week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're going to have 3 winners that are each going to be receiving 12 Brilliant Star booster packs, aka a full booster box. So you've got 3 opportunities to enter since we post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you've got 3 opportunities to win. So a lot of opportunities to get packs. But yeah, now that we've gotten that part of the way, I really want to kind of quickly jump into today's topic. And this is one that, you know, I feel as if this is a really important topic to discuss. It might be a shorter video, it might be a longer video, who knows. But I was on the live stream today, Tuesday. This will be posted on Wednesday. And I was talking to some of the people in the chat, one of which is Nostalgianomics. Shout out to him. And he had recently posted a video called Something That We Can All Agree On. Go check it out on his channel, and go check him out in general as well. He's a great Pokatuber, and one of the aspects of the video was basically him just going and saying like something we could all agree on, but it's more or less a trolley video of him saying things that like, why would people believe this, and like very sarcastically talking about it. And one of the things that he had made a point about was he was like, I think we can all agree upon the fact of the matter that it's bad that we're reprinting Pokemon products so much. Even though you're seeing the price of Brilliant Star and Evolving Skies product going up. But since, you know, Battle Styles and Chilling Reigns is cheap, then obviously it's a bad idea that we should reprint to demand, even though 25 years of history and seeing how reprinting products to demand hasn't affected things. And of course, I'm saying this all as a sarcastic tone in regards to like him making the point of like, this is a really like I just don't understand why people don't think that printing to demand is a good thing, you know, like he was sharing that sentiment, but in a more sarcastic like tone of voice, right? And so I kind of want to give a little bit of a breakdown or a conversation about the history of reprints and specifically going through and looking at just the overall demand cycles for the Pokemon market. Now, before we jump into the topic of what is, you know, specifically demand, one of the things I wanted to point out was a post that was made on Twitter back at February 10th. You can see the timestamp right here by Play Pokemon. We're aware that some fans are experiencing difficulties purchasing certain Pokemon TCG product due to very high demand. In response, we are reprinting impacted products, don't know why I couldn't read that, at maximum capacity to ensure more fans can enjoy the Pokemon TCG. Of course, once again, the Pokemon company coming out and saying to everyone, hey, just letting you guys know, we're going to be printing to max capacity. And for those people that don't already know this, this is something that the Pokemon company has done historically speaking. If you, of course, were around during the late 1900s, or 1990s, sorry, late 1900s. If you were during the time of the Pokemon Go bubble / evolutions, and now if you're looking at the current COVID pandemic bubble, or however you want to look at it, this is something that Pokemon has just always done, is print to demand. If you take a look at the times in which you had just general prices for Pokemon booster boxes during the time of Diamond and Pearl, they were very much so a low demand item. Booster boxes were sitting as cheap as $86, $90 up until 2016, 2017, 2018 isn't really until you started to see that price increase. And that's coming from an era that was extremely underprinted, and it was extremely under demand. It wasn't really, of course, until, like I mentioned before, that Pokemon Go bubble where you start to see a little bit of a demand for Pokemon products start to increase again. So, and that's another argument that we can also have a conversation about the long-term expectations on return when it comes to Pokemon product. Obviously, when you're saying to yourself, all right, well, we had a great recession happen 2008, 2009, 2010. A lot of these booster box products during that time didn't gain very much any value for 5, 6, 7, so on years until 2016. You started to see a little bit of a market cycle turn around. You started to see demand spikes come of that, and then once again, of course, in 2020, where they really started to explode. So it's not one of these guarantees always that you're going to make these massive returns in the same way from an exponential perspective you did in 2016 to now 2020 and so on. So of course the market's completely different now. And that's something that always needs to be taken into consideration on how we are no longer in that kind of dead phase of the market. It's really started to mature, and that's because the market's been around now for 25 plus years. And because of that, assets are going to change. Kind of like you take a look at something like Bitcoin, for example. Obviously, the price of Bitcoin has matured exponentially over time. People thought it was crazy when it went up to $100 and then $1,000, and then you're sitting now at 69,000 at its new high. It's like, this is just something that progressively happens as more demand comes into the market and you see a healthy growth within the market in and of itself. So it's just one thing that needs to be pointed out and discussed about. But going to the back to the main point of, okay, why is it so important that we print to demand, and why is it not a bad thing? Because when you take a look, like I just mentioned before, Diamond and Pearl Air product underprinted. And obviously it's extremely valuable because of it. XY Evolutions era, overprinted. Roaring Skies era, overprinted. Primal Clash, overprinted. All these products were extremely overprinted. What are the price of Primal Clash Roaring Skies booster box? Around $400. What's the price of the Evolutions booster box at its peak? About $1,000, but now it's around $700. So it's like you saw at peak prices for product that was literally 2020. I could purchase an Evolutions booster box for $90 at 2020. Like, that's how cheap it was for me to still buy an Evolutions booster box because of how much had been printed. But since the demand had gone up so much, then you obviously saw the price increase drastically regardless of the overall supply. And that's why I think it's very important for people to really, once again, consider the fact that, hey, sure, we can make the argument and say, if we look at Sword and Shield era product, we can say to ourselves, oh, Battle Styles, it's sitting at $88, right? It's $87. How much is it going for? 87, 88? Yeah. Oh my goodness gracious. Fusion Strike, 93. Is that a bad thing? Since when did that become a bad thing that it was sitting at those prices? Obviously, you're saying to yourself, okay, well, let's make the argument it's hurting the local game store, right? It's hurting the LGS because they're not able to, flip a profit on that. Well, the thing is, in regards to most local game stores, you have your set allocation numbers that you request, and you prepare to request that amount. And when it comes to pre-order prices and premiums, you're able to sell it at those premium prices for wave 1 and wave 2. It's just any wave after that. And a lot of the times you can put in your pre-order prices for wave 3, or they'll allocate you what you want for wave 3, and you can accept them and sell before the price goes down. Obviously, you had a set such as Vivid Voltage or Darkness Ablaze, right? You had multiple prints of these booster boxes, and if the price of Vivid Voltage, when we were talking about the original price chart back in 2020, before wave 2 happened, where the price went from 220 all the way to 120, if you sold right before, you were making an absolute killing. And then afterwards, before we led up to wave 3, Vivid Voltage climbed all the way up to 150, 160. And if you got your Pokemon product before then you still made your money, even after the fact that it was printed into the ground. Even a set such as Battle Styles, a set like Battle Styles, literally wave 1, I was putting up pre-orders and selling out instantly at 150, 144, right around that MSRP price. Wave 2 comes around, I was selling out at 120. Wave 3 comes around, then it was one of those things where I'd still sold out, like I said before, at around that 120 price, because it was right before wave 3 got its print, and then any sort of Battle Styles product after that started to go into the ground, and then it came back up to 109, where some people were purchasing at that $100, $109 price point, and that's still at the point of making margins. Obviously, you'd like better margins, but at the end of the day, it wasn't really devastating the LGS, where they're not able to turn a profit based off of the fact that they're buying it for cheaper than what the market value is. And even then it gets to a point of where it's just over leveraged people getting into product that they shouldn't be getting into. Obviously, of course, there's another discussion to be made on, hey, well, some LGSs are forced to take product because the distributors require them. But in a lot of cases, that's only after they've ordered X amount of product. You committed to ordering that X amount of product. And there is a little finite, as someone who's experienced it before, there's like a finite intricacy on how you can avoid that. But for other distributors like Magazine Exchange, they tell you wave 1, wave 2, wave 3. Do you want it for wave 1? Do you want it for wave 2? Do you want it for wave 3? Tell us yes or no. And you can change that along the way. Like if I say I want all my product for wave 1 and 2 and I don't know what's going to happen by wave 3, I have until wave 3 to decide if I want that product. So to make the argument of, oh, it's hurting the online retailers like small businesses like myself, it's hurting the LGSs, it's only hurting them if they're starting to hoard the product instead of putting the product on the market while it's at that premium price. Because Pokemon, typically speaking, they're only reprinting to demand. Battle Styles is literally the only set where you can make an argument and say, okay, well, it was poorly timed that they printed it to that point. Because when Darkness Ablaze got reprinted, booster boxes were around 170. The voltage, we can literally look at this right now. Darkness Ablaze booster boxes on the yearly, it got all the way up to 190. So that's a lie. Not even 170, 190. Vivid Voltage booster boxes. This is probably the one that went up to 170. I could be off though. Yeah, 170. Vivid Voltage was the one that went up to 170. So you had these booster boxes that were extremely high prices. Obviously, Chilling Reign. It had a very, very delayed wave 2. It got up all the way to around the 150-ish, 160-ish price point. So it's like all these sets. This set is now in the 90s. This set for a while was sub 100. This set for a while was sub 100 as well. And if you got in at those prices, great. If you didn't, well, prices are going up and it's about to go out of rotation. Vivid Voltage had its initial 3 waves and it also had a reprint wave and it's still doing fine. Battle Styles had its initial 3 waves and it had a reprint wave. It's still doing fine. So it's like for people to kind of make the argument that, hey, it's not good that there's been reprints. Actually, Vivid Voltage had initial 2 waves, if I'm correct, and then had a reprint wave. But regardless of the fact of the matter, the point that I'm making of this all in all is I just hear the argument made so many times. Eli, isn't it a bad thing that they're getting such massive reprints for product? Don't you think that it's really hurting the long-term investor that these products are getting printed in the ground so much? And the simple answer for that is no. And it's very obvious to see because, once again, going back to Primal Clash, Roaring Skies Evolutions, printed in the ground, absolutely fine. Sets in the Diamond and Pearl era weren't printed in the ground, but that was because there wasn't a high demand for it. And so, obviously, there's a demand for it that kind of scaled out with the rest of the market. Because rather than overprinting such a high demand set and you see booster box prices of Diamond and Pearl probably be in the low $1,000s to $2,000 price point, you're seeing it in the $5,000 price point, which in my opinion is perfectly appropriate when you look at the value of other items in the EX era. And of course, you want to talk about overprinted to demand. You can make that same argument with Jungle Unlimited, Jungle Base Set, when you're talking about the fact of the matter that, some EX era boxes, some Neo era boxes are more expensive than a lot of the base era product. I mean, you're telling me that even if you had invested in a unlimited box and you're saying to yourself it was extremely overprinted and you can get newer boxes at more at a higher price, that you still didn't walk away with a great return? No, it just means that you obviously have to, in hindsight, value the way in which reprints are going to affect the long-term growth over time of certain products, because a lot of the jungle product and a lot of the fossil product was hoarded. So I don't know why people would think any differently. It's kind of like a set such as, or a game I should say, like Flesh and Blood. Flesh and Blood products is actually garbage right now, and who's to say that people like Rudy from Alpha Investments and other hoarders aren't going to hold on to that product long term? You're going to see a huge massive spike, and a lot of people are going to come out of the woodworks with that. I mean, this just happens with any new collectible. You're always going to have collectibles, and you're always going to have these investors, and when they see the hype, it's not like the hype wasn't there and you didn't have the same aspect there back in the early 2000s, late 90s. The only difference is, grading companies weren't as relevant, and now grading companies are more relevant. You look at the Unlimited Pop Report, Sure, it's not extremely high compared to ultra modern, but the demand for ultra modern product and the amount of Pokemon, people in Pokemon back then versus now has gone up, and so demand has just scaled. And it's something that's very important to understand. And on top of the fact of the matter, you talk about the value or the pricing that you were getting for PSA, sending it in. It was an undervalued price. It should have been higher, in my personal opinion. And I think that might be a controversial statement to say. But when you take a look at, a set such as, Vivid Voltage, a set such as Champion's Path, Vivid Voltage, I mean, the Chunkachu's got like a 4,000, 5,000 PSA 10 population report. Both Charizard's got like 8,000 or 9,000 population report. And then you start looking at Chilling Reign, you start looking at Evolving Skies, like these population reports are in the 200-300s compared to the thousands. And that's because it's at 50. Now, of course, do I think should it be at 50? Of course not. I don't think it should be at that point. But I do think that it's a fair assessment to say, hey, I personally think that these should actually be valued way more. I think they should be valued at, some point of, $20, $15, $25 for, an overall grading fee for these cards, because the population demand for these cards is just extremely high, considering how many people are going to send them in for grading, as we saw when it was back at that $9, $10 price point if you did send them in bulk. So that's just something I think that's really important for a lot of people to consider. And let's say Evolving Skies, right? I mean, Evolving Skies, it got its initial, 3 waves. We have yet to see a reprint wave. And after its initial 3 waves, it's at 185. It still hasn't broken the high. It's really relatively close on a charting perspective for it to break the high. But presumably speaking, if it gets a reprint, you know what's going to happen with Evolving Skies? Probably the same exact thing that happened with Darkness Ablaze and Vivid Voltage after they got their reprints and crashed nearly 50% plus. It's going to go down to, whether it be 100, whether it be with 120, whether it be 110. We don't know how big of it is, and we haven't had any reprint news in the near future in regards to booster box reprints outside of Brilliant Star, which it sounds like it's not going to be a massive reprint, so who even knows how low that's going to go. But you say with Evolving Skies, for example, who's to say that if the price doesn't go all the way down to 100, 110, this is all of a sudden an amazing opportunity, because people are going to gobble that up. You're going to see prices crash drastically. And the only thing that's going to really get affected in the long term is going to be single prices, which I don't think is a bad thing at the end of the day, because I think sealed is deflationary, which is always, in my personal opinion, going to be a better investment long term at the end of the day. And who's to say that it's necessarily a bad thing for the price of cards to ultimately be a lot cheaper than the price of booster boxes? I mean, obviously, if we go back, of course, let's do an advanced search right now, and we go look at the XY Evolution set compared to the value that the booster box has. It's still relatively cheap for you to go through and invest in the individual cards, or I shouldn't say invest, but collect the individual cards at a really cheap price. The only one that's the most expensive, of course, is the Charizard, because if you're talking about in a PSA 10 condition, there's such a low population because of how poor the printing was, that the value, of course, for the Charizard is extremely high compared to most things. I think it's going for a couple $1,000s. And so maybe you can make an argument saying, well, maybe the pull rate should be worse. But of course, then that takes away the experience for a lot of people, because if the pull rates are worse, then it's not going to be as fun to open. So I think having that balance where you're able to overprint the product, and I wouldn't even consider it overprinting, I'd say printing to demand for the product. You're able to print to demand for the product, and then of course over time the demand is still going to scale out, and you're still going to be able to make massive returns on, at the time, ultra modern product, and the only thing that's going to be affected is the cards. I mean, the amount of people that I've heard that have complained about the Evolving Skies prices for an ultra modern set than an Umbreon VMAX alternate art, I mean, just look at what it's done. Like, it literally crashed all the way down and crashed to 173, is around the low, 170, 173, and now it's doubled in the span of, 8 months now, I want to say. That's insane for a card to do that. Not even sealed product, for a card to do that. So it does bring, for me personally, a lot of concerns in regards to what I think potentially could be a big, what I potentially could see being a big problem if they weren't to print to demand. Because you're going to have cards and sets that you're going to look back on, and you're going to say, this is kind of extremely expensive, and is Pokemon going to truly be an expensive expensive luxury hobby, and that's something I don't think it should be. Obviously, once you start getting into the fact of, are we collecting PSA 9s? Are we collecting PSA 10s from, first edition, base set, shadowless, all these things? Is it super duper expensive for me to do that? But ultimately, if I really want to go back and collect a set such as, let's take a look at like an EX set, right? Let's go with EX Power Keepers as an example. If you're telling me that I go into EX Power Keepers and I'm spending, 1 card, 2 card, 3 cards, 4 cards, where the average market price is, $3 to $100, right? And this is an extremely old set, right? And then you have all these other cards that are anywhere between that 80 price point to 30. And of course, this all comes down to the condition you want to spend, right? So you say to yourself, all right, we do some quick math. You're probably spending around $1,200 to $1,500 if you really want a master set in EX Power Keepers. Pretty expensive, right? I mean, the set itself, of course, is, 10, 15 plus years old, right? Now we go back to Evolving Skies, and you say to yourself, wait a second, this is a modern set, and this modern set is going to cost me the same, if not more, to master set than it is going to if I want to go get a set that's 15 plus years old. Like, that's insane to me. $300, $200, $150, $150, $130, $90. I mean, once you add it all up on the amount of cards that are valued $50 or more, it wouldn't surprise me if the price to collect Evolving Skies, a set that is literally 8 months old, is more expensive than trying to collect a set that is 15 years old. That's insane to me. It shouldn't be that way. And so I think that it's a fair assessment to say, hey, if we reprint these products to where it's affordable now, and then once they go out of rotation, then the value will start to go up. Then the prices of the cards will begin to go up. But if you're telling me within the blink of an eye, I am no longer able to invest in, or I'm no longer able to collect these products from Evolving Skies because the demand is so high, then not only does it ruin the investing aspect of the hobby, not only does it ruin the collectability aspect of the hobby, it ruins. And then, of course, you say to yourself, well, let's just increase the pull rates or decrease the pull rates, because then the value of the cards will go up if we decide to print in the ground. Well, then that just takes the fun out of it. And so that's the whole point of this hobby at the end of the day, It's like, obviously, we invest in this hobby because it's a fun hobby to collect and make money. And I obviously look at these things as more as my own personal collection. But, of course, long term, I do have some sealed product that I do look at as, hey, I just want to invest in this and I know the market well. And I understand how general nostalgia works. But at the end of the day, it's still a hobby where I like to master set. I like to collect things, Like, I've master setted Battle Styles, I've master setted Shining Fates, I've master setted Champion's Path. Like, I'm going through and I have my binders and I try and master set all the Sword and Shield era stuff, Sun and Moon era, EX era, and, XY era, and all these different eras. I like to master set because it's fun, and in the grand scheme of things, it's relatively affordable for the most part. I mean, obviously, if you're talking EX era, that's pretty expensive, but comparing it to how expensive it is for Sword and Shield era, it's about right on the money. You go back to a set such as XY Evolutions, like I showed you, pretty dang cheap. You go to even a set such as Ancient Origins, which when you talk about card prices, it's pretty expensive compared to the majority of the other XY sets. At most, you're spending around $100 for the most expensive card. You look at all the other cards, how expensive they are. No shot you're spending over $1,000 collecting a set such as, Ancient Origins, which is a pretty high demand set. You talk about some of the other lower demand sets in the XY era. You've got Gyarados, which is around 30, Skylar around 30. You're talking 17, 15. I mean, you're probably spending on this set alone roughly around $250,000, which is really affordable, really reasonable for most people to master set something such as an XY Breakpoint. And you might just keep saying, well, Eli, XY Breakpoint, I just don't care. There's just nothing in that set that's for me. Okay, well, let's go to a set like Phantom Forces. Got an amazing Dialga EX Secret Rare. It's got a ton of cool Gengars. I mean, you take a look, once again, 149, 50, around 50. you're probably spending, once again, no more than $400 to $500 master setting this, and I think that's pushing it. So, because once you really get past these main top cards, then everything really goes down to around $10 to $5, and I think that's great considering you talk about how expensive the XY booster box is and how cheap it is to get these cards currently speaking. So there's just a lot really to talk about in regards to the conversation of finding that balance between demand. You're able to get sets like XY Evolutions, which if you had invested in 2020, you would have been able to, of course, made an absolute killing. And now everyone might be saying, and here's another counter argument, because I always like making counter arguments to myself because I hear a lot of these arguments all the time. Well, Eli, if it weren't for the pandemic, or Eli, if it weren't for the bubble that happened, then these things could be crap. And I would like to say, well, I disagree with you because, it was, of course, a factor that caused the overall hype of Pokemon to come back. Don't get me wrong. Having stimulus checks and people stay home instead of going on vacation was definitely a catalyst. But long term, the growth of the hobby would still be very strong, even for those underprinted or these overprinted sets. The only difference, of course, would be is the scalability of it all. Instead of seeing crazy returns like we saw, we would see like a lot more incremental returns. But I think even in the world of stocks, volatility has gone up. In the world of crypto, volatility has gone up. And I think that really just comes down to accessibility. I remember back when I was a kid, I was buying loose packs on eBay for $3 for Stormfront. And I thought that was a great deal. Little did I know, I could go buy a booster box for $82, $80, and would have saved myself a ton of money. But when you're a little kid and you're 10 or 11 years old, the internet is still fairly new in the grand scheme of things. And you're still trying to, figure things out versus you have a lot more people in the hobby. Internet is a lot more prevalent for kids that were my age during that time. When you're talking about going off of a desktop that literally took 30 minutes to load up, and now you've got lightning fast like computer processing speeds, it's completely different the way in which the world and the accessibility has changed. So yeah, obviously if it weren't for COVID, things wouldn't happen, but if it weren't for the internet or it weren't for influencers, then you probably wouldn't see the same hyper demand as you would if those things didn't exist. So you just got to be able to understand that, time changes. You got to be able to understand and adapt to those things. And then from that, you're able to recognize and realize that, hey, printing to demand is once again not a bad thing, because the Pokemon company is going to do that as more and more people get into the hobby. And as more and more people get into the hobby, as more and more influencers get into the hobby, all it does is it makes it better and better, because those products of the XY era, those products of the Sun and Moon era, Sword and Shield era, as they become the new vintage in the next 10 to 15 years, the value of those booster boxes are going to go up exponentially, and that's mainly because, just once again, that full-on exposure. And even if something like COVID didn't happen, you're still going to have, once again, the internet and other social media influencers really sparking into the Pokemon collecting world, and it's going to cause a lot of people to really still continue to come into the hobby or rejoin the hobby, based off of trying to chase that nostalgia or understand the love that is Pokemon card collecting. But as far as it goes, now I'm going to get into the main point and wrap-up point of the video. Main discussion is why I think it is a good thing to print to demand. One, historically speaking, we take a look at Roaring Skies. We take a look at Primal Clash. We take a look at Evolutions. These sets printed into the ground, booster boxes were sitting around 80 to 90, and now look at how expensive they are now. Evolutions at its peak hit 1,000. The only thing, of course, point two that was affected by that was cards. Cards, obviously, the price for XY era is still relatively affordable, but I think it should be that way, because when you take a look, once again, with the next point I'm making of Evolving Skies prices, when you're telling me that it costs the same price for me to collect Evolving Skies, which is a new set that came out 8 months ago, the same price for me to collect that set compared to Power Keepers, which is a 15-year-old set, it shouldn't be like that. It shouldn't be this expensive to collect, and especially considering how big these sets are nowadays. So I think it's a good balance, because printing to demand not only long-term has historically been shown to not truly affect the price of sealed because it is deflationary, but two, it also has shown that still older cards are still going to gain value long term, and new sets for ultra modern, whether it be from a collectability perspective or a competitive viability perspective, shouldn't be this expensive. And then of course, point 3, and the main point I want to make about this, and this is once again a counter argument to those people who say, well, if it weren't for the bubble of if it weren't for the bubble of COVID, then printing to demand would have still destroyed these things. As I mentioned before, 2016 you had Pokemon Go. That was a huge bubble and prices started to rise, and that was not, of course, influenced by the pandemic. It was influenced by Pokemon Go. There's always going to be other variables that are going to factor things in, such as the Logan Pauls of the world, such as the internet becoming more readily accessible nowadays compared to in the early 2000s, and having such a huge influence based off of what's going on with social media. And of course, once again, now the hobby has gotten older, and so now nostalgia is more prevalent than ever. So those are kind of the main 3 points of the video in regards to why I think printing to demand is not a bad thing, but is actually a good thing for the hobby long term from both an investment perspective and a collectability perspective. But hopefully you guys found all these points fruitful. I hope you guys found value out of this video. As always, if you did enjoy it and you want to enter into our weekly giveaways, make sure you subscribe, leave a like, comment down below on any of the videos we post each and every week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. As always, we have 3 winners that will each be receiving 12 Brilliant Star booster packs. So you've got 3 opportunities to enter by liking and commenting Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then 3 opportunities to win, of course, if you are subscribed as well. So I can't thank you guys all enough for the content, or not enough for the content, allowing me to produce this content. And I can't thank you guys enough so much for the love and support that I've really shared with you guys in regards to the hobby that I do love to collect as well as invest in. But as far as it goes for today's video, though, thank you guys all so much for watching. Until then, I will see you guys on Friday. Peace.